Great.
All right. Good morning to those joining us. Thank you so much for coming to our counselor presentation this morning. We'll get started with the formal presentation in about a minute or so. Just want to give a little bit of time for other attendees to join in today. So I just want to say a quick welcome to everybody. Wherever you may be joining from, hopefully you are coming to us from the comfort of your home and taking care and staying safe and well. One of the things I want to mention, if you have not participated in a Zoom webinar before, there is an option for a question and answer chat box. So you should be seeing this option either on the lower portion of your screen, depending on the device you're using, or it may be towards the top of your screen. But just feel free to click on that Q&A box throughout the presentation if you have any specific questions. And we'll try to get the questions answered at the end of the presentation. So I hope everybody is staying well. I am coming to you from my living room in Minnesota, and we're getting beautiful spring weather today. The weather is starting to warm up. We've had a mix of some cold days and some really hot days. So it's still that spring weather where Minnesota can't quite make up its mind if it's spring yet or still lingering a little bit from winter. But it looks like we have a lot of warm days ahead. So we're definitely looking forward to summer here, especially after the long Minnesota winters.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like summer next week, Beth. Did you see the weather?
I haven't even checked the weather because I get so discouraged every time I see the cold stretches ahead. That's amazing.
I've been covering my vegetable garden every night. And I looked at the weather yesterday and it said like almost 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So
oh my goodness.
Summer.
I'm ready for that. Definitely. Especially after this last weekend.
Yes.
The cold snap. That's perfect. All right. Well, it looks like we have several participants who have joined us for this webinar. So I just want to say welcome and thank you again to those who just joined. My name is Elizabeth and I am going to be joined by my colleague Alissa as well for participation throughout the question and answer session. And we just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to learn a little bit more about study options for your students who may be looking to study in the United States, or maybe you are just looking for more information about a specific university or specific programs that we might offer, or just learning a little bit more about general US higher education. So today's presentation is going to be a little bit informal, but I want to talk through just a couple things that are pressing at this time. This presentation is focused on counselors. So we'll talk through finding tips for finding the best fit for your students and things that you may want to be considering specifically during this time of COVID-19 and some of the challenges that the current times are presenting for students as they're looking for higher education study options abroad. And so we'll talk a little bit about that in summary, and then I'll share some details about Minnesota State University and our scholarships and program offerings for students, and talking about our campus and community services as well. And then we'll have time at the end for some question and answers. So again, if you're just joining us, please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A chat box, and we will be happy to answer those at the end of the presentation. All right, so we'll get started here. So my name is Elizabeth, and I work as the International Student Recruitment and Retention Specialist. I am based out of the Kearney Center for International Students at Minnesota State University, Mankato. So this is a little bit separated from our admissions office, but our office works directly with our admissions team. So our campus does recruitment based out of our international center, which is really helpful for prospective students because we also do immigration advising based out of our international office. That's important to note because as students are applying to US universities, of course, they have to go through the student visa process. So we have excellent support services available for your students who are navigating that visa process from the international office where I'm based out of. And then I am also joined by my colleague, Alissa, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Beth. I'm Elisa Morrison, and I have my fun Bitmoji up there this morning because our hair salons have been closed for over 2 months and my hair is crazy. But yes, I am the Assistant Director for Strategic Communication and Recruitment. So Beth and I work very closely together in the Carney Center. I recently moved into this position when before I was doing all immigration advising and programming. So it's a really good transition for me to work more with prospective students because I do have, like Beth said, so much background on the other areas that international students want to know about. And I also manage our team of international enrollment assistants, which are trained students that are available every day, Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. to help students. So we do have live chat help for students, whether they have questions about our university or just general questions. So that's a really good feature for us. And they're really good at helping students with visa prep. So that is one thing that we love to have our students for.
Perfect. All right. So we'll jump into kind of the first segment here. Of course, I think the majority of our participants today are in the counseling field for students, so mainly coming to us as counselors at high schools. Some of you may be working as counselors at different agencies for education advising. And so some of these intro slides will probably be pretty common knowledge for you as counselors. But I just wanted to take a moment about things to consider as you are finding the best fit for students, especially here in the United States. There's a lot of factors to consider when finding that fit for the student. Of course, you want to make sure that the university the student is applying to has the academic program offerings available for their academic interests as well as their career interests. What's going to be the best fit to help them eventually land that dream career they're pursuing. Cost, of course, is one of the biggest factors in determining if a student can attend a university and if that university is the best fit for them. Location can also be a factor, as well as what support services and career development opportunities are available for those students. You want to make sure that they're getting great academic advising, great career advising, immigration advising, as well as other special interests. Maybe the student needs an LGBT center or wants to focus more on the women's centers that are offered on campus or other unique advising services. Is there counseling available? Is there accessibility for students who may have learning disabilities or need additional accommodations in campus or in their classes? So those are a lot of factors that you want to be thinking about for your specific students and their unique needs, as well as the interests of the parent. And then of course, other factors such as campus and community life, what research opportunities might be available for students. Safety is of course a very important factor for both students and their families when they're making that decision of where to send their child to the US or maybe to another country. And then what housing options are available for students as well, and is the cost of living affordable to meet the budget that the student and their family has set? And even transportation, will the student be able to get to campus and get to their classes or their internships, what transportation is available for the student. So these are just some of the things that I'm sure you are very familiar with as you're advising students and helping them find that best fit. In the US, there are more than 4,000 colleges and universities. There's community colleges, public universities, private universities. There's a lot to choose from, and every university has their own unique application process as well. So that's a lot of information, both as for counselors to know, for students to know, as well as their parents as they're going through this application process. So I just wanted to touch on a couple things that you're probably familiar with if you've helped your students apply to the US university admission process. But you're probably maybe have heard of the different application types. When applying to US universities, there is the Common Application, or Common App for short. Many universities participate in the Common App, but it's important to note that not every university in the US is found on that Common Application. That includes Minnesota State University, Mankato. We actually have a direct application process. So if a university is not found on that Common Application platform, you'll want to encourage students to look at the direct application process for the university. Other things to consider would be the application fee, especially during the current times. Many universities are offering application fee waivers, so it is important for students or counselors to ask if a fee waiver is available for them as they're applying. And then for most university systems, once a student has completed that initial application, the next phase is to submit the application documents. And in most cases, that will include their academic transcripts, exam results from any national exams or final exams that they may have taken, depending on the curriculum that the student is studying in. Some universities will also ask for their proof of graduation with their final diploma as well. Depending on the country that the student is applying from, and even the curriculum that the student is applying from, they will likely need to provide English proficiency, which most commonly is in the form of TOEFL or IELTS, but also Duolingo is being more widely accepted by many US universities right now. Again, with the situation going on with many testing centers closed, having that online option for testing is really important for students right now. And thankfully, TOEFL, IELTS, as well as Duolingo have transitioned to online platforms to accommodate student needs during the time of COVID-19. Other schools will ask for standardized tests such as the SAT or the ACT, but there are a lot of test optional universities as well in the United States. So it's important to ask if it's a test optional institution that the student is applying for. Other universities will require essays or statements of purpose, as well as letters of recommendation, which as counselors, I'm sure you are frequently getting asked for those letters of recommendations on behalf of the student. So you're probably very familiar with that process as well. And other documents might be requested by the university to make a holistic admission decision, such as their extracurricular activities, volunteer certificates. So there's a lot of different factors that are going into that application process. And so I want to emphasize that not every US university has the same application process. And so as a counselor, that makes your job a little bit challenging as you're advising students, because you might have to know so many different requirements if a student is coming to you and trying to navigate this process. So I want to encourage you and let you know that as universities, we are here to help support you as counselors. And that was one of the motivations for us to host this session, to make sure that you understand some of these underlying factors of applying to US universities, and we can be here to help navigate the process and also share information about Minnesota State University and our application process. And of course, things that you'll need to pay attention to as you're going through this with your students are the application deadlines. Every university has their own unique application deadline timeline. So some universities will have early application and regular application deadlines to apply, and some universities will operate on a rolling admission process. Minnesota State University falls under that rolling admission process, which means a student can apply at any time before the application deadline, and they will receive an admission decision within about 2 weeks. So that is the rolling process that we can offer. And something else, just given the unique situation that we're all facing right now with COVID-19, is how to help students choose that right fit during these unique times when there's not a lot of recruiting opportunities going on. I'm sure many of you as counselors or maybe agents have attended a lot of recruitment fairs with U.S. universities visiting your schools, or maybe the city that you live in, and you're probably used to sending your students or maybe even taking your students to these recruitment events. It's really challenging right now because recruiters are not able to physically travel to meet your students. So many universities have transitioned to virtual student meetings and webinars and virtual admission events and even virtual fairs. So make sure that you are reaching out to different universities, especially if you had some recruitment events lined up with specific universities. You might want to contact them and see if they have any virtual opportunities for your students. At Minnesota State, we have been offering a lot of virtual fairs focused on general university admission, but also some regional admission requirements. So we have those sessions recorded that we can share with your students as well. So we can follow up with that information later. Many universities have virtual campus tours that students can take of the university campus. You'll want to consider, like I mentioned at the beginning, the location of the institution as well. The program offerings, given the current situation, will the student programs be offered on campus? Are they transitioning to a hybrid platform, or will they be transitioning to an online platform? Some of those factors may be changing on different university campuses, depending on the timeline that those universities are reopening. Also, has the expenses and the financial aid situation at the university changed, given the current times of COVID-19? Living on campus, is this going to be an option for students who may be able to physically come to the US, but will the university dormitories be open? This is a factor to consider as well. Are there still going to be research, internships, and on-campus employment opportunities available for students? So these are just a lot of questions that I'm sure you are getting as counselors and factors to consider as you're helping students choose the right fit. And I just want to mention too, I see some questions coming into our Q&A chat box, so that is great. And I want to mention we'll cover those questions at the end of the presentation. So thank you. Keep submitting those questions. We want to make sure to answer as many questions today as possible. All right, I want to transition now into focusing on Minnesota State University Mankato and the opportunities that we can offer for your students. So we are a public university, and we were established originally as an education school to train teachers. We're more than 150 years old, having been established in 1868. We enroll around 14,000 students, so we're a mid-sized university, and our student to faculty ratio is about 20 faculty to 1 student. So overall, about 2,000 faculty and staff are on campus. And we're very proud to welcome more than 1,200 international students from over 90 countries on our campus. So there is a lot of diversity represented in the university system. So your students should, regardless of where they're coming from, should feel right at home at Minnesota State. So if you're not as familiar with where Minnesota is located, we are in the north central part of the United States, bordering Canada. So right in the middle of the US, which if you come to Minnesota, we're about a 3-hour flight from just about everywhere within the continental US. Minnesota is a top state for business, education, engineering, manufacturing, and technology. And I like to emphasize that we also headquarter 17 Fortune 500 companies in our state. And what that means for your students is there's a lot of opportunities for employment, whether that's internships during their academic program or doing work experience after they've graduated. So some of the companies you may be familiar with include 3M, General Mills, Best Buy, Target. We also have Cargill, CHS, just to name a couple. And then if you're familiar with the Mayo Clinic Health System, this is also based in Minnesota, and it actually is the #1 health system in the United States. Minnesota itself is a state of 4 seasons, meaning we do have very cold winters. I know that's a concern of a lot of students, but I promise students come to us from all climates, and they do survive our winters. But we also balance it out with very hot summers and beautiful springs and autumn season as well. We're a very natural state. We're known as the state, the land of 10,000 lakes. So we have a lot of natural beauty from our lakes and our forests and prairie, but we also have great urban centers and environments as well. And we're actually home to the Mall of America, which is the largest shopping mall in the entire United States. So that's kind of our claim to fame as well. So why students choose Minnesota State Mankato? Out of all the universities that are offered in the United States, of course, the program offerings is the #1 reason. Students want to make sure that we offer the program that they're interested in studying. But also we are affordable. We are one of the most affordable state universities in the United States. And I'll talk more in detail about that. But we're able to offer unique scholarships for bachelor students. And as well for graduate students, we have flat rate tuition. So regardless of where students are applying from, regardless of which program they're applying from, there's not a difference between resident tuition that a Minnesota student pays versus a student who might be coming from Canada or Vietnam or China. So that is a unique aspect from our university standpoint, is the affordability. We are also a very safe learning environment for students. We have 24-hour campus safety, and the city of Mankato, where we are based out of, is also a very safe learning environment for students. We offer many different student support services, including the Counseling Center, Women's Center, the International Office for Immigration Advising and Counseling, the LGBT Center, just to name a few, and of course, excellent career development support and academic advising throughout the student's career. There's many different student activities and community to support campus life and encourage holistic development of your students as well. So a little bit about our academic program offerings. We have more than 130 bachelor programs available for undergraduate students. And then if you are working with any students who may be looking for a master's or doctoral program, we do have about 85 master's and doctoral programs. Something to note, we do not have a medical school or a law school on our campus. So many of your students I know are probably interested in going into medicine or potentially law. So in the United States, if a student is pursuing that, they would come first to get their pre-medicine or pre-law degree at the bachelor level, where they might be studying biology if they're going into pre-medicine, or maybe political science or criminal justice if they're going into law. But they would first come to get their bachelor degree and then could transition into their medical program or law program that they would apply for. So I do want to mention that just because it's a frequently asked question that we get from counselors. But our programs are distributed through 7 colleges, and I'll show those different colleges to you in the next slide. But I want to highlight that our programs are nationally accredited, and 2 of our top accreditations for our common programs for students include business and engineering. We are AACSB accredited as well as ABET accredited for engineering programs. We're also ranked in the top 20 US universities for undergraduate research. So if your students are looking for unique research opportunities, this is something that is available to them at the bachelor level. They don't need to wait until their master's program to participate in active research. We host an annual research symposium on our campus as well, where when we're in session, this is typically held every April, and students can present their research that they've been working on with their faculty mentor, or perhaps in their research team that they've been part of. Annually, we also send students to the Undergraduate Conference or the National Conference for Undergraduate Research in the United States. And over the last several years, our research teams have presented in top places in their different disciplines that they've been presenting for research. And so we're very common to send teams and individuals to that conference, and we provide grants for them to participate in research. So something to highlight for your students who may be looking for those opportunities. Some of our top programs include aviation. We are the only aviation program in the state of Minnesota. So we offer professional flight training for commercial airline pilots, as well as aviation management. And then other programs focus on the STEM fields in biology, engineering, information technology, as well as business and psychology. So those are some of the top programs that students are coming to us to study. And I mentioned that our programs are distributed over 7 colleges. So that includes the College of Science, Engineering, and Technology, College of Education, Business, Social and Behavioral Sciences, Allied Health and Nursing, as well as the College of Arts and Humanities. So our university is not focused on any one specific discipline. We have excellent programs across all disciplines for your students. So whether they're coming for engineering or they're coming for communications or art or business, we have excellent programs to provide for them. So a little bit about the admission requirements for our bachelor degree programs. I know this is going to be key for you as counselors as you're taking notes about the requirements for students. And I want to highlight that we have what's called guaranteed admission, or you may have heard this as open admission. What this means is if the student meets minimum requirements for acceptance, they are guaranteed admission to the university. So we do not limit or cap the number of students who can be accepted to the university or to any one particular program. So when a student is applying to Minnesota State, they apply to the university and can choose any major. So that is regardless of the high school secondary subject that they may have focused on or their academic stream that they may have studied in their secondary education. They can actually apply to any program. We do not do subject analysis for admissions. We also are test optional for the SAT and the ACT. So if a student chooses to provide this at the time of admission, we can use it for their English proficiency scores, but it is not a requirement for admission. Their admission is primarily based on their academic GPA, which we convert. So when the student sends us their academic transcripts, we do the conversion into the US grade point average system. So we're looking for a minimum 2.0 on the US 4.0 scale for minimum admission requirement. As far as English proficiency as well, you'll see here that for most of our programs, we accept the TOEFL and the IELTS. But again, we do accept the SAT or the ACT in place of TOEFL or IELTS if your student chooses to take that, or maybe has a better score in the SAT or ACT and wants to present that instead. English proficiency is required for students who are studying in the IGCSE, the International Baccalaureate, or AP students. So I do want to note that if the student is coming from a country where English is not the first language, we will still be asking for English proficiency. So beyond that, students will need to show financial support during the time of admission. of how they plan to pay for the first year of education. And I'll talk about what those specific costs and documents might look like for students in the next slides. But I just want to mention that as well. So those are the minimum requirements for admission for our bachelor students. So if you have follow-up questions about that, I can answer those at the end of the presentation. So as students are navigating the application process to Minnesota State Mankato, I mentioned at the beginning that we have direct application, so we are not on the Common App. So if students are applying to us, they do need to submit a direct application through our university. We do not have an application fee. Currently, the application fee is waived, and students can also use a promo code. This code does not expire, so if the student is applying in 1 semester, 2 semesters, or 3 semesters, they can use this promo code, the INTL MAV, and the application fee will be waived for them. Once the student has applied, they can begin working on submitting the application checklist documents. This would include their academic transcripts. We do accept scanned copies of official transcripts, so the student does not need to send us the physical copy. That can actually be sent to us by email. The same is for the English proficiency results. We will accept scanned copies of those official results, whether it's TOEFL, IELTS, or the SAT or ACT. And then I mentioned the financial statements that students would need to provide. This would include a bank statement or a bank document from whoever their sponsor may be, who's covering the cost of the education for that student. In many cases, we do have students who have more than one sponsor. So they might have a parent and then maybe another family member who are supporting that student. So we will accept combined bank statements and financial affidavits from those sponsors as well. Once the application materials are received, we look through everything and we make an admission decision within 2 weeks on average. And so that rolling admission process is really helpful for students who are trying to make decisions as quickly as possible about the right fit for the university. So I would encourage your students to apply, submit their application materials as quickly as possible, and they'll receive that admission decision as soon as their application has been reviewed. We do have 2 intakes per year, our fall semester and our spring semesters. Fall semester starts at the end of August and goes through mid-December. Spring semester starts at the beginning of January and goes until the beginning of May. So we actually just finished our spring term for our current students last Friday. And so we do have the application windows listed here. Our fall application deadline is still open for students. That deadline is currently June 15th, and the spring semester deadline is October 15th. So even for this fall semester, if you have students who are still thinking about applying for admission and aren't quite sure about taking that next step, we do still have openings for students for this fall semester. And I know you're probably getting a lot of questions right now about what fall semester will look like for international students trying to study anywhere in the world and specifically in the United States. And so I'll kind of address some of those topics later on, but I do want to mention that we are working on our plans for the fall semester to accommodate international students who are accepted, but may not be able to get visas in time to study on our campus, or maybe are not able to enroll physically on campus this fall semester for whatever reason. So for our bachelor students, we are making preparations to have online learning to enroll at the university in maybe 2 to 3 classes for their first semester until they're able to physically come to campus. We also have deferral options for students as well. So if they're applying or accepted for the fall semester, but just are unable to enroll for whatever reason, we will allow students to defer up to 2 semesters, so as late as fall of 2021. So those are a few things I will mention for right now. And again, I see a lot of questions coming into our question and answer chat box. So that is great. I will mention for those who are joining us that we'll get to those questions at the end of the presentation. All right, so I know a lot of your students are also looking for scholarship opportunities. I mentioned at the beginning that we are one of the most affordable state universities for international students. The reason for this is because of one of the scholarships that we are able to offer for international students. It's called the International Maverick Scholarship. This scholarship is guaranteed to every international student who is accepted to the university. So there is not a separate application process. The only requirement is to be accepted. And then this scholarship can be maintained each year that the student is enrolled at the university, as long as they meet the minimum requirements that are listed here. So that includes being a student who is studying on either an F1 or a J1 student visa and maintaining their status. And then also they do need to maintain their academics at the university. So either having a 2.5 semester grade point average or a cumulative grade point average of 3.0, they do need to maintain that. This scholarship is also focused on integrating students into the campus and community life and giving them an opportunity to share their culture as well. So there is a volunteer cultural component to it. And students can complete this requirement by participating in different cultural events throughout the academic year. Some examples of what students have participated in includes our annual international festival, where students might give a performance or a musical selection or a poetry selection from their home country. They might cook food or participate in a fashion show that highlights their home country. Students also participate in our signature cultural nights. These are typically focused on different countries or different regions of the world, where students have the opportunity to represent their country and their culture to the campus and the community. So those are just a couple examples of the cultural requirements that students have been able to participate in. Some students have been able to go to local elementary schools or high schools to give presentations about their country and their culture, just to educate students in the community as well. So that will be a requirement to maintain the scholarship for current students. But what the scholarship does is it reduces tuition by 40%. So I'm sure you're familiar that many universities have a non-resident tuition rate in the United States, which means if a student is not a resident of the state that they are studying in, they're typically charged full non-resident tuition. That is the case for international students on our campus. They are charged that non-resident tuition, but by maintaining the scholarship, it reduces that tuition by 40%. So our current annual tuition with the scholarship is less than $10,000 US per year. And so you can see the cost comparison of our non-resident tuition rate versus the current scholarship rate. So non-resident tuition for international students would be around $16,700 per academic year. With that 40% scholarship, it brings it down to just around $9,200 for tuition and fees per academic year. That includes banded tuition for international students. So if they are taking anywhere from 12 to 18 credits, which on average is between 4 to 7 classes, it is banded tuition. So it's the same cost, whether it's 12 credits or 18 credits. Other costs that students need to keep in mind in the total estimated cost of attendance includes living expenses, books and supplies, health insurance, as well as personal expenses. Many of these costs are variable depending on the student's situation. Our living expenses is based on dormitory accommodations with a shared dormitory and a meal plan in our cafeteria. For books and supplies, this is estimated per academic year as well. This will vary depending on the student's classes and the textbook requirements for those classes. Excuse me. been talking a lot. My throat is getting dry here. Health insurance as well is something that international students are required to purchase on campus. I'm sure many of you know that US healthcare is very expensive, so we want to make sure that students have adequate health insurance coverage. And so one time per year, students have to purchase health insurance to make sure that they have the coverage that they need for medical expenses that might arise during their time of study. And then personal expenses, of course, this can vary depending on the student's circumstances and their living situation as well. And I do want to mention that for the dormitories, students are not required to live on campus. So we have many students who choose to live in the dormitories for their first year, but we also have many students who decide to live in apartment accommodations with other roommates. Oftentimes, apartment accommodations can help keep the cost of attendance lower for students because they have a little bit more control over choosing different apartment styles and prices, as well as living with more roommates to keep that cost low as well. So I want to mention, or at least emphasize, that both options are available to live on campus in dormitories or in apartment accommodations. We also offer an intensive English program for any of your students who might not meet the minimum English proficiency requirement for admission. So if that might be the case and your students need more English training before they transition into their academic program, this is a pathway option for those students. They can first come to study in one of the levels in our intensive English program and then transition to either bachelor or master admission. We offer intensive English training from beginner to advanced English levels. So the timeline for students, depending on what level they're coming in at, would range anywhere from 1 semester to about 4 semesters if they're coming at the very beginning. So I do want to mention that as well. As far as campus and community life, we have a very active student community. One of the programs we're really excited to offer international students is called our Friendship Family Program. Students who participate in this are matched with a family from the Mankato community. They might be matched with 2 to 3 other international students, but that family kind of adopts the students in the community and does different activities with them throughout the semester. They might take them to a movie or cook dinner with them or invite them to their home for a holiday. So many students have been able to learn more about American culture through this Friendship Family Program. So again, it's not a host family situation where the student lives with them, but it's an opportunity for them to have this family that they can interact with and learn more about American culture and hopefully have a great experience building more long-term friendships with a local community family member. We also offer more than 230 student clubs and organizations. So in the US, you probably have recognized that learning doesn't just happen in the classroom, it's holistic learning. We believe in the development of the whole person. And so it's important that students get involved in extracurricular activities, whether this is a sports club or maybe an academic focused club. Students have many different opportunities to learn and grow as individuals and gain more skills throughout their time as a student. We have very active International Student Association and cultural organizations on campus representing students from all over the world. We also have a very active student government, and we're excited that we have a new vice president who is one of our international students from India. She was just elected and she'll be joining our student government team in a leadership role next year. And we have many international students that are represented on our student government each year. So the voices of international students is a priority on our campus, and we make sure that they are accommodated. For the students who may be looking into athletics, we are NCAA Division I in ice hockey. And of course, we're a northern state with winter, so ice hockey is a priority in Minnesota. For the rest of our athletics, we are NCAA Division II. We also offer athletic scholarships for students as well. And so if that applies to any of the students you might be working with, keep us in mind and we can follow up with you about the process to be recruited and be considered for some of those athletic scholarships. There are many, many different events taking place during the regular academic year as well, with different concerts and movies, guest speakers, and so many activities for students to get involved and find community. So they do not, they have many opportunities to make friends and feel like they're involved and part of our campus and community. And then I mentioned at the beginning, safety as well. It needs to be a really high consideration for students as well as parents. So we do offer 24-hour safety and security services for students. This includes a walking program, security walk program. So for example, if a student would have a night class on campus and they don't feel comfortable walking back to their dormitory or across campus alone at night, they can actually contact one of our security officers and they will come and meet the student and walk them across to wherever their destination may be on campus. Around our campus, we have 5 residence halls. Residence halls are what we call our dormitories. We also have a campus dining center or a cafeteria, cafes and coffee shops located throughout campus. So students have the opportunity to purchase meal plans for campus dining, whether they live on campus or off campus. So that's available for all students, regardless of their living situation. We also have really great recreation facilities for students to go to the gym and stay fit and active during their academics. That is really important to a student's personal development as well, and just staying very active throughout their academic career. Across campus, we have a library facility offering tutoring support, as well as assistance as students are doing research projects. We have great reference librarians on campus who are available to assist students regardless of what field of study they are focused on. We also have very modern campus computer labs and academic buildings and facilities. We are constantly trying to be innovative on our campus and make sure that we have the most up-to-date technology in our academic buildings, in our laboratories. So that is available for students. We also have great technology support for students as well. So if they're coming to campus and they maybe don't have a laptop or they have a device that breaks down, they can receive excellent technology support, or also training on some of the campus software that we use for the classrooms. So students will have great opportunities to learn more about that to support their academics. I mentioned at the beginning as well as our student support services. This includes immigration advising for students on student visas, academic advising, counseling, LGBT center, multicultural center, women's center, and accessibility resources as well to accommodate students who maybe have different learning disabilities or need additional accommodations in their classroom or alternative testing options. These are available for students as well. And for students who may be looking for more of a challenge in their academics, we do offer an honors program as well. And students can apply for this after they've received admission to the university. They just need to submit 2 letters of recommendation from their high school counselors or a teacher or professor who maybe knows them as well. And then, of course, career development. This is something that is very important for students as they are pursuing their academic career. Of course, the ultimate goal is their professional career. And so we provide support from the first year that students enroll at the university, where students can receive career advising about what types of jobs might be available in their career field, as well as prospective salaries that they might be able to earn for those given career fields. Our Career Development Center hosts about 5 annual career fairs where they bring different campus employers or different employers to the campus for students to do on-spot interviews or just learn more about different employment opportunities through Minnesota-based employers, Midwest employers, and even national employers within the United States. So we draw a lot of employers from all over to our annual career fairs. The Career Development Center also hosts different workshops that support resume writing skills, interview skills, and networking opportunities. And they also offer one-on-one advising for students as well. So if a student just wants to have somebody look over their resume or their CV, they can drop into the Career Development Center, and one of the staff will be able to look over that with them and give them some tips. They also do mock interviews with students. So if a student is going through that interview process for a job and just wants to practice their interview, that is a great opportunity for them as well. If you're familiar with the F1 and J1 student visa, you probably know that there are different internship opportunities through CPT as well as OPT. And so we work with students as well to support them in their career to make sure that they're getting immigration advising that allows them to participate in internships and jobs after their graduation as well. So all of that support is available for your students at Minnesota State. And then as we're wrapping up here, I want to introduce you to PJ. PJ actually just completed her spring semester on Friday, but she spent the last year working as one of our Maverick global ambassadors, and she did an excellent job of working with students. And so she had submitted just a statement about her experience at Minnesota State Mankato. And she said that she chose Minnesota State University Mankato because of the excellent research programs that were offered, and it's a very peaceful college area. She had many memorable experiences in the university and met so many interesting people from all over the world and created unbreakable bonds with them. It gave her an opportunity to work on overcoming her fears, and she's very happy that Mankato is her home and her chosen family. So we were very excited to welcome students like PJ to our campus, but also highlight that we have Maverick ambassadors, Maverick global ambassadors who are there to connect with your students. So if your students want to interact with a current student, they have opportunities to do so, to connect with one of our Maverick global ambassadors. But we also have a lot of other ways that students can get advising as they're going through the application process, or even going through the visa application process later on after acceptance. We're here to help them. So we offer virtual admission advising, virtual visa prep sessions, as well as that opportunity to connect with current students through our ambassador program. So I would encourage you to share this information with your students, to advise them about the process of applying to Minnesota State University Mankato, and also just connect with us on social media. We're very active on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. We have many different videos and recordings of past webinars that you can share with your students to learn just about applying to Minnesota State Mankato, but also general information about applying to the US. So these are just a few of the resources that we have available to help you as counselors, as well as help your students. So I do encourage you to connect with us. And with that, concludes kind of this formal part of the presentation. So thank you for staying with us and staying with me as we've talked through all this information. I know I've talked a lot, so I appreciate your patience, but I hope this has given you a holistic overview of U.S. higher education, as well as opportunities for your students at Minnesota State Mankato. So we'll transition now to our question and answer session. All right, I'm just opening your chat box questions right now. So if you still have questions that you would like to submit, please feel free to go ahead and do so. All right. So it looks like we have Sarah joining us from the International Schools of Azerbaijan. Welcome, Sarah. And she has a question about, do you have any programs in place for returning expat students, specifically students who have lived overseas most of their lives and are essentially international students, but do not need a student visa? And are they automatically incorporated into international student induction activities? That is a great question. We do welcome expat students to our campus. We've had many students apply to us and enroll who grew up overseas, but are not necessarily requiring a student visa to study here, but probably feel more like an international student. So in the past, we've integrated these students by allowing them to participate in our international orientation. It's not a requirement for them to come to the international orientation, but for those students who've chosen to participate, we found it's helpful because they feel connected to other international students who are going through that same transition to US culture, and maybe experiencing some form of culture shock by studying in the US for the first time, even though they are probably a US passport holder. So the process for expat students applying to the university is a little bit different than the international student process. They will be treated as a domestic student, even though they are applying from overseas high school. So they will need to meet our domestic student admission requirements. Also, if that student is not a resident of the state of Minnesota, they would be charged the full non-resident tuition. Unfortunately, they would not qualify for that international Maverick scholarship that I mentioned earlier, but they do have other scholarships that they can qualify for to receive in-state tuition based on their academics. So I hope that helps kind of answer the general question, but yes, we do work with those students and we've had them enroll on our campus. Also, another question we received, do we have sensory rooms on campus for students who have autism or other sensory issues? Another great question. Specifically at this time, we don't have a designated sensory room. We do have accommodations available for students with autism to accommodate different testing opportunities if they need additional support for students. Sorry, I'm just reading through this chat box here. We do have opportunities for students to have alternative testing or alternative tutoring where a student with autism may be able to go and take a test outside of normal class time hours just to accommodate their needs. But the traditional sense of just having that sensory room available, I don't believe that's available at this time, but we do have great accessibility resources on campus, and they do their best to provide accommodations on case-by-case basis for students. And so if that is something specific to that student's need, please reach out to us and we can work with our accessibility resources to find out more about what could be put in place to accommodate that student. And I think, Alissa, you also have something to add to that as well.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what Beth was saying. Our office has a very close relationship with the Accessibility Services Office. We work with them quite often for students who have had injuries and need accommodations for that, or if they do need something like a sensory room. And they are very committed to helping students. So like Beth said, I'm not 100% sure if we have one on campus, but if that is something that a student needs and we're informed of early, I'm sure that Beth Clausen in the Accessibility Services Office or Julie would be able to help us identify that service for a student. But like Beth said, there's so many accommodations for students. So this is really a good place for students to come if they do need that extra support. We do have 1,200 international students, but honestly, if I saw probably 900 of them, I could give you their name and information about them. So we do really get that close bond to our students to help them.
All right, I'm seeing a couple questions I'm gonna kind of combine here because they're very similar. So again, going back to the admission requirements for bachelor students, we've gotten a couple questions if we are test optional and asking for clarity on what test optional means. So for admission in the US, if a university is test optional, that means that standardized testing is not necessarily required for admission to the university. They likely do holistic admission or have minimum admission criteria based on the student's overall grade point average. And so we are a test optional university. We do not require the SAT or ACT for international student admission. So hopefully that helps with some of the students who have not had access to taking that SAT or the ACT or are not prepared to take it. In that case, we would focus or base their admission off of their academic results. For the academic results, our minimum GPA requirement is a 2.0 grade point average or equivalent. And we actually do the equivalency in our admissions office. So regardless of what education curriculum the student may have studied, they just need to send us their transcripts and we will convert it into that US GPA system. So they do not need to do any form of credential evaluation. Also, we do not do subject analysis. So if a student is in a specific academic stream or has focused their high school on a specific subject, let's say engineering, for example, but they want to transition and study business at the university level, they can actually apply for business even if their background is in engineering or STEM. So they can apply for any major regardless of their high school stream. So I want to emphasize that as well. And then let's see here. Another question we received is how many students would be in the typical first year classroom? This depends on the types of classes, obviously, that the student is taking. Our largest lecture hall on campus seats around 300 students. Every other lecture would be much, much smaller than that. So at the most, if a student is going into biology or any of the biological science fields and they're required to take biology, our biology lecture hall is that one that houses the 300 students. So that potentially would be the largest class that a student could take. But on average, our typical class size is about 20 students to one faculty or professor. So most of our classes are relatively small, where students can get more individualized and one-on-one attention from the faculty in the classroom. But depending on the general education classes that students first enroll in, they might have maybe 50 to 60 other students in their classroom in some of their larger lecture halls. Once they start to get focused into their major, that's when it really gets much smaller to about that 20 student to one faculty ratio.
Can I just jump in as well, Beth?
Yeah, of course.
Every international student that comes to Minnesota State University is required to take kind of an introductory course to our university. It's a 1-credit course. And that has anywhere from 15 to 20 students in it and has a faculty member that is very well connected with all the services on campus. So even if they're taking those general ed classes at the beginning with larger class sizes, they will have that 1-credit class with a very intimate setting where they can hopefully get to know other students, faculty members, and where they can receive the help that they need. So I think that's something unique about our university.
Great, thanks, Alyssa. Looks like we have another question about English proficiency and what determines if a student needs to take an English proficiency test. So typically for English proficiency, we actually base it off of where the student is a resident of. So if that student is studying or is a resident of a country where English is not the first language, then in most cases we do require some form of English proficiency. But if a student is a native English speaker and the language of instruction is English, we can work with those students on a case-by-case basis, again, depending on what country they're currently studying in, as well as their academic instruction. But even for most English-based international schools, if it's based in a country where English is not the primary language, we typically have required English proficiency for those students. So even if they're studying the IGCSE, International Baccalaureate, or AP, our admission requirements have traditionally been to request TOEFL or IELTS from those students, but we have worked with students on case-by-case basis before. So if depending on the situation of your student and where they may be coming from their country of residency or the curriculum that they're studying in, reach out to us and we can try to accommodate that student, especially during this time when testing is not necessarily available. Given the COVID-19 situation, we've been having a lot more flexibility with students in these situations. And then Alissa, do you have anything to add to that as well?
I think you covered it.
All right.
You're the pro, so.
Hey, teamwork makes the dream work. All right. Let's see. Looking through other questions. There was a second follow-up question as well to the test optional question for returning expat students. So if they're US passport holders or permanent residents, they are held to the domestic admission requirements. And so students can actually meet domestic admission requirements in one of three ways, through either their class ranking or their overall cumulative grade point average or the SAT or ACT. But in most cases, those students are, our domestic students are asked to provide either that SAT or the ACT. So the test optional option is for international students. Domestic students in this case, in most cases, would be required to provide the SAT or the ACT. All right. Looks like those are all of the questions for right now. If there are any final questions that we didn't have a chance to get to that are burning in your mind, please feel free to type those in the chat box. We'll be happy to answer it. But otherwise, that concludes our presentation for this morning. Alissa, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I was just going to mention that I had answered some of the questions in chat format. So Beth didn't talk specifically to that question. It's probably because I stole it and wrote an answer to you. But yeah, like Beth said, we're always available via email. Right now, email is actually the easiest for me if you want to get in touch with me. But I know Beth, sometimes mobile is better. Is that right for you?
Yeah, mobile is great. And also right now I've been doing daily virtual admission advising sessions, one-on-one sessions with prospective students as well, just to talk about different options of enrolling and applying to the university. But as a counselor, if you're interested in ever scheduling a virtual session just to chat through different options with your students, that is something I would be happy to meet with you about as well. So feel free to reach out to me or even Alissa, I think would be open to that. I'll go back to our contact page here. So if you want to reach out to us, email or WhatsApp mobile is available in both modes of communication. And we'd also be happy to schedule a Zoom call or virtual session with you as well, if you have more one-on-one follow-up questions.
Yeah, and I know a few of you had asked if this webinar is recorded. We are recording it, so either Beth or myself will get this out to you probably in the next day or so. And we will also include other resources for you to share with your students and to just have on hand. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for taking the time to join this webinar. And we really appreciate all the great questions, and hopefully this has given you a little bit more context for applying to the US in Minnesota State, Mankato.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye, everybody.